Hello. For somebody like Chris Evans or Jay Leno, this video is going to be completely pointless. But for me, or indeed someone like me, this would be a dream come true. Don't you think? In order for this to make sense, I need some rules, to devise some rules that you can follow when you answer with your perfect 10 car garage as well. 10 cars, only 10, and these are the only 10 cars you're allowed to have or ever have. Starting to sound a little bit less attractive now, isn't it? They are perfect. There's no problems with them. Anything that goes wrong, if it does, will be fixed as part of the service. You cannot sell these cars, they're yours. You have to keep them. The only way you can get rid of them is by giving them away, but then you can't replace it with anything else, so that's pointless. The Renault 16. A 16 GTX preferably. Well, in fact, yeah, a 16 GTX. I want the top model. I want it to be in a metallic green or metallic brown. I'll have all the electrics. I'm talking about the Mark II as well, the one with the squared off headlamps. It's just such a quirky, stylish, interesting car that it just captures the 70s as far as I see it. The 70s in France and the 70s in the UK for people that, you know, do they want to have thought. Close runners to this particular car would be, I suppose, another Renault, like a Renault 25, a Renault 20 or a 30. But the 16, for me, it's just so different. It was a really very interesting looking car. Such comfortable seats, wallowy at the corners, but it just hung on. It gripped really well without stiff suspension. That's the kind of car I like. I really, really want one of those. One thing I would really, really like to do with a vehicle is go camping with a camper van. It's like having a caravan, but a van. So it's a nice, rigid vehicle that you can take yourself around the Highlands of Scotland with. And maybe again, in my usual, slightly weird and unrealistic way, which is more practical, I would go for an LDV Convoy. I know a Sprinter's better, drives better. I know a Transit's better and drives better. But the LDV Convoy, for some reason, it just appeals to me. Whenever I see them about, they just seem to be driven by more kind of bohemian characters that are more like my kind of people. Possibly. You might call them I just call them eccentrics. Then again, I get in two minds about it because the amount of noise those engines make and the fact that they drive like a tractor and they're not even particularly high up in the driver's seat and they're not even that long. Yeah, they're sort of medium wheelbase. I might have to rethink that one. Would I really have an LDV Convoy over a long wheelbase Transit? Yeah, why not? Sign me up for one of those. It is obviously fairly important that I should have a coupe in my 10 car garage. So what coupe? Well, you already know. Or do you? I don't know. It is a Mark III Capri 2 litre S in red. A Capri 1.6 LS in silver was my first actual proper car. And that's why I prefer the 2 litre S, because I had one of those soon afterwards. So you might ask, why not have a 2.8 injection? Did them in red? Well, I had one of those as well, and it was rusty, and that's enough to put me off. But speaking of Capris, I did once see a 3 litre S in black, and it was absolutely spectacular. That could possibly be the one to beat the 2 litre S for me. Now, the 2 litre S didn't have as much power as the 2.8, but it felt quicker. Maybe it's just that my 2.8 wasn't really very good. And this isn't about speed anyway, it's about looks and desirability. And would you mind? This is interrupting my video. Thank you. Although I have very fond memories of the Capri, and I did find it to be a wonderful looking car, and I still do. It was dreadful. They don't drive nicely. They're not economical. No, that's important either. But the fact that they drive so badly just makes me wonder whether I've made the right choice here. Because after all, if I want a coupe, what's wrong with a Prelude? Prelude's fantastic. All generation Preludes, fantastic. Or actually something that's more of a competitor to the Capri, like the Opel Manta, or even better, the Mark 1 Vauxhall Cavalier Coupe. I had one of those, and that is a fantastic looking car, and it drove better. If only this was a list of my top 10 favourite coupes, which again, maybe that's another one to do, then obviously the Rover Coupe would be in there, and the Fiat Coupe, and many, many, many more. But this is just the car that I'd have in my 10 car garage. And although I don't even like the Capri particularly, it's going to have to stay. With any kind of list like this, you've got to consider everyday circumstances, and so you'll need, well, basically an everyday runaround, something that you perform most of your tasks in, something that you can just get in and drive anywhere from one end of the country to the other, to do your shopping, to ferry your children around, unless part of the deal is you get rid of them. Now, most people would probably go for something small and nippy like a Fiat 500, but I don't see the point. I'd rather have something that I would happily drive every day, something that is comfortable, something that's big, something that's safe, something that's stylish. So what I thought was, how about a Rolls Royce? Yeah, like one of the newer ones, a really big flash ostentatious thing, and then that suddenly puts me off. So maybe, you know, a Jaguar. But then I don't really like the newer Jaguars too much either. So how about a BMW? I don't have to, I'm not going to explain why. Or Audi. No, none of them really work. The only one that really does it for me would be a Citroën C6. I remember when these Citroëns came out, and I thought I'd love to have one of those. It's such a nice looking car, and when they're cheap I'll buy one. But they've never been cheap, and they never will be, because they're rare. Something like a Renault Grand Espace would be a good idea actually, but no, the C6, it's just such a different car. Either that or an XM. Not an XM, no, that's the ugly one. The CM. These CMs are, I really do like the CM. So yeah, that's my everyday car for you. Why not go it the whole hog and get something stupid? And that's why I'd fancy a 1960s American station wagon. I'm not sure which one because I don't really know very much about them. But the full size thing, yeah, the one that's about 18 foot long. The one that you could sleep in the back without even putting the seats down. The one that's 7 foot wide with pointy bits on the edges, but also smooth parts. Not a 70s one, a 60s. And that's the weird thing, I don't even know what it's called. There's Buicks and Dodges and Fords and all these other kind of things. And any of them will do really, as long as it's really, really jeffing big and not with those wooden bits down the side. I don't like that. Don't like that at all. Yeah, I'll do about 6 miles per gallon, but it's not really the point. That bit doesn't actually matter. The MGF is definitely for me a car of choice. I really want a nice MGF. This is a TF, which is not really the same thing. Well, I mean it is, but it's slightly different. It's different enough for it to be not the same thing. I'm allowed to be really specific with this, you know. It's not the difference in looks that's the important thing here, because they're both very, very cute little cars. But the F, the early one, is just a little bit more cute. It's as simple as that. But it's not as simple as that, because actually it's more comfortable and it's a little bit better made. And with that, somehow it's just a bit more classic as well. So, why the MGF and not an MGB? Or a Mazda MX-5 or something like that? Well, I've driven a Mazda MX-5 and it was very good, but the F just... when I drove the MGF, it was everything I could want from a car, except the practicality side and, well, possibly speed. But there are more important things than being practical. I really like the MGB and the MG Midget, Triumph TR6 and not so much the 7, and the Triumph Stag, but I just haven't got the right kind of moustache for those cars. Just like most men would like a supercar, they would also like a proper hot hatch. And I'm no different here. So my choice is the Rover 420 GSI, which admittedly is not a hatchback. Amongst the other cars I will have here, I'm not really going to have much need for a hatchback, so I can get rid of that. But why a Rover 420 GSI? Well, possibly for nostalgic reasons. I have had two of them. It is slightly better looking than the hatchback version. And the coupe, I would have a coupe, but I can't. If I'm going to have a choice, I've got to have a choice, I've got to choose one. It's going to be the 420 GSI. And not the turbo version. There's no need for a turbo on it, it's quick enough. I'm not a greedy man. That's why I'm only having one Rover, rather than an 800 and an 800 Sterling and an 800 coupe and a 600 and they didn't do a 500, did they? A P6 or a SD1 or any of these things. The R8 is the pinnacle of Rover as far as I'm concerned. So I may as well just have one of those. And the M series engine is just superb. I think, to be honest, if this list proves to be reasonably popular, I am going to do my 10-car Rover garage as well. Maybe. Right from the start, a car that was definitely going to be in my 10-car garage is the Triumph Dolomite Sprint. Again, it's a car that could come with some alternatives should the car not be available, but obviously it is. But I'm very, very keen on all of the 60s and 70s Triumph saloon cars, like the 2000 and the Rover P6, which admittedly is a different car. The Dolomite is just such a fantastic Italian design. I've always loved them. Ever since the time when my granddad had one. He had a Dolomite Sprint when it was new. I think it was a Sprint. But yeah, it has to be the Sprint, not the 1850 HL. And it has to be either blue or yellow. In fact, yellow. I want a yellow one. The first production car ever to have a 16-valve engine. But you knew that. And if you didn't, where have you been? They are what I would call a beautiful car. And they drove... And you compare something like the Dolomite to the Escort or the Vauxhall Chevette at the time, it's just a different car altogether. Dolomite was incredibly predictable, but exceedingly leery as well. Back end, very, very loose, but you knew it was going to happen. And when I had one, it never actually caught me out. In the wrong hands, the Dolomite will just flip you into a field somewhere without really giving a toss. There's not really anything negative to say about the Dolomite, really, except of course the back wheels had a habit of falling off, but that might just be my one. I would indeed also like an off-road car, something capable of properly going off-road and towing things. So that's why I would like a Land Rover Discovery. Not a Defender, although they are rather charming things. The Discovery is a bit like their better looking cousin with the correct amount of fingers. And not a flash one either. I'd want the second generation Discovery. The one that still looks like it belongs on a farm. And this is a car I really wouldn't be bothered about what colour it was. And I wouldn't be too bothered about the paint. I'd happily have a really scruffy one. I'd quite like it to have leather seats though. It's got to have a tow bar. As this is one of my dream cars, it's not going to have a rotten floor pad. But why? Why a Discovery 2 over a 3? Or another big off-road thing that's more capable, more comfortable, and probably easier to live with? Well, it's just about liking things, isn't it? I've driven a Discovery 1 and I just really liked it. And then I drove a Discovery 2 and I just really, really liked it. It was a bit longer. And then I drove a Discovery 3 and it was alright. Some of the personality of the two had just gone. The Discovery 3 just didn't really float my boat so much. Very, very handsome looking car. Yeah, but just not really for me. And finally, on my list, my dream 10-car garage You can guess this. You have to guess this. I would have Nigel in there. I'd keep Nigel. Why would I keep a crummy, multicoloured Rover 25 when I could have a McLaren F1 or a Jaguar XJ220? I'm not joking either. I definitely would keep it. Carry on taking it to all the shows and things. It is still, after all, just as distinctive as anything else I could have. Being as I can have any car I want, anything, why is Nigel still in my garage? A 19-year-old Rover 25 with 110,000 miles that I want to keep exactly as it is. Why would I do that? Well, the answer is obvious, really. If you was a dog lover and you had a scabby old Labrador with a knackered leg and, you know, half its teeth falling out, and you couldn't take it for walks, it was smelly, then you got offered a whole litter of lovely new Labrador puppies, would you chuck the old one out? No, you wouldn't, would you? When I first acquired this car, it was possibly the least glamorous car I'd ever seen. But I soon changed all that. I've turned it into a personality. Without this car, probably the channel wouldn't really exist. Well, it might do. But I've improved it. I've made this my car. I've done all sorts of things to it. It's no longer rusty. It's no longer horrible. It's no longer smelly. It's no longer all the things that it was before. And it's always been reliable. And sure enough, being reliable isn't the issue here. I could have the most unreliable car in the world if I wanted to do, yet for this circumstance it would still work. As unrealistic as that is, that's what it is, and that's why, as unrealistic as it is, I would keep Nigel in my garage. Which brings me back to the original point. Everything in the garage you have to keep. So there may be cars I would prefer to have to this, but only so I could sell it. And being as I can't sell it, what's the point? All of my choices have been around whether I like them rather than whether other people like them. It's not about image, it's about that connection. And this car does something for me. If you had a choice of two cars, one of them will make you happy as you drive it, and the other one will just make other people jealous. Which one would you go for? I'd go for the one that makes me happy. Making other people jealous doesn't appeal to me whatsoever. If part of your own fantasy isn't something of what you've already got, then you're going to struggle to understand what's really going to make you happy. An alternative would have been a 10-car garage, but I keep Nigel somewhere else. But that's not very realistic, is it?